I think Mbilli looked just right for what Canelo wants. That's exactly what Canelo wants.
Well, I'm going to push back on that. I'm going to push back on that because listen.
I raise your pushback with another pushback.
Welcome into Boxing Scene's top stories here on ProBox TV. Download the ProBox TV app. Never fall behind in your boxing news. Well, it's a weight class we've covered a lot, 168 pounds, super middleweight. Of course, Canelo, the big name, but there are other champions. It looks like Christian Mbilli, his promoter, telling us that Diego Pacheco might be next. They are in talks, both fighters undefeated. Diego Pacheco, a bit of the young gun in the division at 22-0. Of course, Mbilli, 28-0. Both have the O that, of course, Canelo would like in a future fight, but both might have a couple years to go or skills to acquire before they are ready for Canelo, which, as Paulie says, is always how Canelo likes it. I'm joined by the champs, Paulie Malignaggi, Chris Algieri. First off, this fight itself. What do you think of this matchup, Paulie? Who would you favor? Who do you like?
I like the fight. I like the fight a lot, actually. It's there's good fights to be made in this weight class. There's fun fighters. The ironic thing is the ones that aren't that good are the ones when Canelo's involved. But when these guys all fight each other, which they, a lot of times don't want to because they're trying to hope to position themselves for a title shot. If you see this kind of fight happening, Morrell and Benavidez, for example, is happening at light heavyweight because they know that winning at light heavyweight will result in them possibly a better chance of getting a title fight. I don't know if the winner of Mbilli Pacheco gets a title fight. I guess it depends on how good or how bad you look. It depends on which way you think Canelo's thinking. But I like the fight. I think stylistically it matches up well. I don't think Mbilli can be in a bad fight. I think he's relatively limited, but I think he makes fun fights. And Pacheco, he's a big, tall guy, but at the same time, he's also not like a super defensive wizard either. He has that Mexican-American mentality in there where he wants to put hurting on you as well. So I think it's a solid matchup. I really like the fight.
Talk to me, Chris, a little bit of that Pacheco 22-0 against Sulecki last time out looked absolutely devastating in this fight. But to Paulie's point, maybe a little green. Is he the kind of guy you fight now before he acquires those skills? He's a young man, I believe 22 years old.
I love Diego Pacheco. I'm a big fan of him as a person. I'm a big fan of him as a fighter and what he has and his potential. And absolutely, you got to get this guy now because I don't think Canelo beats this kid in a few years. Does he beat him now? Most likely yes, because of the experience. He hasn't had that big fight experience yet. You see him beating guys like Sulecki. Sulecki's, in the mid-30s, hasn't been that active. We saw him have trouble with McCalman, who was a thinker, and he slowed down the pace. Well, guess what Canelo does best? Slows down the pace, makes you think, counter punches. So there's a lot of things that I've seen from Pacheco thus far that would make me think that Canelo would be the favorite in that fight. But I'm not saying I wouldn't want to see it. But I think Canelo. I think this is very calculated right here. This fight's a surprise unless you really think about it, right? So I wouldn't think that either one of these guys would risk this opportunity because if they lose, they're not getting Canelo, right? You're not going to. And it seemed to me that Mbilli was the next logical step for Canelo. But Mbilli looked limited against a one-armed Derevyanchenko. I think if he went out there and he busted Derevyanchenko up and got him out of there and was the first guy to finish him or dominated throughout, even with two hands, I think we would have saw Mbilli and Canelo. Because I don't see how Mbilli ever beats Canelo. He's just like you said, champ. He's limited. He makes a lot of mistakes. He showed a lot of mistakes in that fight as well. He's more of he's a gas tank guy. He's a fun guy. But there's holes in those defense in that defense that Canelo's going to capitalize on.
I think I don't necessarily think this is the way you're saying, champ. I'm going to push back a little bit here. Canelo doesn't fight until May. If these guys fight in January or February, if you make this fight relatively soon, I know it's just being talked about right now, the winner could fight Canelo.
Well, they could, but you're taking a risk.
Yeah, you're taking a risk.
How the fight goes.
Well, of course.
Because Mbilli got hurt in his last fight beating Derevyanchenko.
Yeah.
So if that happens again, that fight doesn't happen. So that's what me with the risk.
But Mbilli, you're not guaranteed to get Canelo, so you want to stay busy. You want to keep yourself relevant. Also, I think Mbilli looked just right for what Canelo wants. That's exactly what Canelo wants.
Well, I'm going to push back on that. I'm going to push back on that because listen.
I raise your pushback with another pushback.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on that because listen, I don't think anyone who watches Mbilli thinks he can beat Canelo. And if he looks he comes up, but again, if he comes off a bad fight, but also you don't think he's going to beat him, we can't make that fight happen. But if you come off a good fight and you can't beat him, then you're going to get the fight. That's my point.
But you know what? Canelo also likes to slow the pace down and doesn't want to really work hard anymore. And Mbilli, you're going to probably beat him, but you got to work to beat him.
Yeah.
I don't know. Not only do I not think Canelo wants to fight guys that beat him, I don't think Canelo wants to fight guys that make him try hard at this point. You know?
All right, so if we're going your
even
train,
Mbilli's disqualified.
so if we're going with that
point.
train of thought, I'm not saying that's the path, but if we're going that train of thought, okay, then they're hoping that Pacheco beats him. And then you can use
We're
his
going with that
experience to slow.
we're going with that train of thought. If I'm going to be really honest with myself, and I know the Triple C's hate this, but probably a guy like Sulecki has a better chance of getting Canelo next than any of these two guys.
Well, is there another urgency there? Because we talked to this young man on here. He's got a mature mindset, but Diego Pacheco is 6'4", real lean, real skinny, real wiry. Will he stay at 168 long enough to make this happen? When you talked about guys who could move up to 175, we got our 175 rankings. That's on ProBox TV as well on our YouTube channel. We talked about Pacheco. He's just not going to stay at 68 that long. Paulie, what's your thought on that?
You know, he's only 22 years old.
Yeah.
Very, very wiry frame. Yeah, man. I mean, you typically start to fill out a little more, especially grown men. I think they're still more naturally filling out into their mid-20s. You know, then you can add on muscle if you work hard enough and fill out a little bit more as you get older. But certainly, you're naturally still growing as far as your filling out process is concerned as a grown man. Probably into your mid-20s. You know, so I don't see Pacheco being at super middleweight for that long anyway.
What's your thought too, Chris? When you look at the ceiling for this kid. When he packs on what we call man muscle, and we know that as you get in your mid-20s, you start hitting harder, you just fill out, as Paulie said. He already hits hard. What do you think this ceiling for Pacheco might be higher than Mbilli, and that's why Mbilli's fighting him now, perhaps?
I mean, potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, we had him on our air, and he said, yeah, 75. I definitely see myself there, and I think we all see him there. I told you, I've interviewed him multiple times on Matchroom Undercards. I've called a bunch of his fights. He has a giant man voice. Like, he's got this deep set voice for a Mexican guy. It's very strange. He's a big guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a big frame, wide shoulders, super tall. He's a very large human being.
They're smaller heavyweights.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. He has the length and the leverage of a heavyweight for sure. But yeah, I think 75 is certainly in the future. I don't know how soon. There is some filling out to do, some maturity to come. But listen, if you're in orbit for a Canelo fight, you're going to hang around as long as you can until you can try and get that fight.
Especially as they keep making the weigh-ins 2, 3 days, 4 days before the weigh-in. Then you can make, and anybody can make weight. And just recover.
I called a lot of Diego's fights early on, and it did seem like he struggled to make weight in the beginning. And then as the fights wore on, I remember interviewing him, and I said to him, like, champ, you made that weight very easily. He goes, oh, yeah, no, I definitely did. I'm like, and you look bigger than you did in your other weigh-ins. He goes, yeah, well, I'm just doing everything right now. I'm really dialed in. I think he's a really focused guy. I think he's newly a father within the past year or so, and that's really dialed him in. So, listen, this guy's going to be around for a long time. Whether he fights Canelo next or down the line, even if he loses to a Canelo, this kid has a very, very high potential in 68, 75. Shoot, we may even see him cruiserweight one day. Who knows? He's got the dimensions.
Well, the question is the Mbilli fight. Can he get past Mbilli? If he does, his future is wide open. Once again, at 6'4", wiry frame, he can go up to 175. Will the fight happen? That is a question. As soon as we know anything, so Justin talks now, it'll make boxing news, and you'll get your boxing news right here on ProBox TV. Don't forget, December 7th, Ireland on Ireland main event. It was a great last time. That's why we're doing it again.
ProBox TV Contender Series. On December 7th, look for an all-out Irish war as Dylan the Real Deal Moran battles Tyrone the Mighty Celt McKenna at the top of a stacked ProBox-worthy card.
For more ProBox TV, scan the QR code on the screen or go to the App Store and Google Play. ProBox TV, your boxing channel.